Football 24/7 on JAKIB Sports. It's postgame. Eagles versus Browns. Week 2 of the preseason is in the books. Eagles get a win. 21-20 was the final score. John, I'll get right to you. Your first takeaways on the game. Anything that stood out to you? Any players that stood out to you? What's your first impression as the game concludes?
My first impression, we finally got to see Devin Allen run. For whatever reason in practice, the Eagles haven't let him just go deep, and it's pretty exciting. He just raced by. Looked like the Browns were in cover 3. The safety bit up, and he just raced by. Poor Lavert Hill, who was
6 yards in the dust.
Yeah, former Eagles corner. He was here a couple years ago, but yeah, he just ran right by him, and Reed Sinnett couldn't overthrow him if he wanted to at that point. So great play, exciting play. That's all you can hope for in the preseason game, and the Eagles got the win. So
nice,
yeah.
Well, I thought he looked apart.
Yeah, well, he is a football player. I mean, people forget he played at a high level in college at Oregon before he made the shift to track. So it's not like he's just a track guy. He's played football before. So, yeah, it was fun to see him run, and he did the hurdle celebration. Everybody seemed to have some fun with it. So, yeah, that's what you want from a preseason game. And the Eagles got out of there with the win. I thought we kind of said at halftime, the first team offense with Gardner Minshew looked great. They had 3 drives of over 10 plays each drive, and the defense didn't look great. So that's kind of where you were. And then you got into the second half, and Josh Rosen versus Reed Sinnett, and it was kind of ugly, but that's to be expected. I wouldn't, get too upset about that. And Carson Strong got to throw a pass, so and he probably should have gotten that was at the end of the game there that could have clinched the game. It probably should have been an interference on Devin Allen, but they didn't call it. The defense picked up against Josh Rosen, but I wouldn't get too excited about that. It became what typical preseason games become late in the game, and that's offense is struggling.
Yep, John, let's switch to the running backs. We talked a lot about it in pregame. I told you I wasn't happy with the depth in the room behind Miles Sanders. While the 2 guys behind Miles Sanders looked pretty good today. Boston Scott started strong. I know he only played a series, but he had a heavy workload in that series, and he looked really good running the football. Same thing with Kenny Gainwell. He got into the end zone. Your takeaways on the running backs today is that I would say that's a pro. That's a plus today, if you will. Your take on the running backs?
Yeah, certainly from the perspective of Kenny Gainwell, who hasn't had a great training camp, and he showed up and he played really well. Although it was an indication that there may have been a little sea change there. The fact that, with Miles unavailable, if you think about if he gets hurt in the regular season, I think the presumption at the beginning of camp was, then Kenny Gainwell will just take over. I don't know if that's the case now. I think it's pretty clear. It's kind of how I would describe it is Miles is the lead back. And as I said in the pregame show, Kenny's the third down back, the hurry up back, and the specialization back, so to speak. And if Miles were to go down or miss a game, then the lead back is going to be pretty clear today. It's going to be Boston Scott, and Kenny will just stay in that role.
Right.
But he played well, so maybe he can open that door again. And maybe it's I mentioned it with Gardner Minshew. He seems to be more of a game player than a practice player. Maybe the same is true of Kenny Gainwell. Maybe he's more of a game player than a practice player because he played really well when he got in there.
Gamer Gainwell, I think you called him at halftime. John, wide receivers, I know we talked about it earlier. Not a huge window open there, but you did see some good things. You talked about Deion Kane early. We talked about him at halftime as well. Devin Allen had the big deep ball. Covey was in there, Covey or whatever, Britton Covey his name is. How do you see that position? Is there any movement there? I know really the only thing that could make room for any of those guys would be a Rager trade, and they go six deep at wide receiver, and then maybe you could see Deion Kane finding his way onto the roster. I don't know how else it could happen, but break down how you see that.
Yeah, I do think the five are pretty much locked in, and that's obviously AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, which you didn't see today for obvious reasons. Quez Watkins, Zach Pascal, Jalen Rager. And then do you want to keep six? And maybe that depends on, your depth at other positions. The Eagles don't have a ton of depth at running back, as we mentioned. So maybe you only want to keep three. Maybe they don't have a ton of depth at tight end. So maybe you only want to start the season with two. And if Tyree Jackson's going to come back early, or you think he's going to be ready early in the season, maybe you carry him as the third. There's a lot of different ways you can go, but to keep six receivers, I don't know. That's going to be difficult because, as I said, I think in our halftime show, you have to contribute elsewhere if
Right.
you're going to be a fifth or sixth receiver, and that means special teams. Greg Ward, look, it's pretty clear that Deion Kane is a better receiver than Greg Ward, but Greg Ward is this team's arguably, I wouldn't call him the best punt returner, but he's the most reliable punt returner that they have. And that's a big thing. When you don't have a game breaker at that particular position, a lot of times all you want to do is have safety and make sure the guy's going to make the right decision. The guy's going to catch the football and get as much yardage as is there. So my issue with Deion Kane is, where else is he going to help? Where else is he going to help? Because he's going to have to help somewhere else to make this football team.
Yeah, and that doesn't look. It doesn't certainly doesn't sound like he can do that at least at a higher level than the people he's fighting with the spot for. Anything else? Anything I'm leaving out on the offense? Did anything else stand out to you today? I know we had talked about wanting to see a little bit of Grant Calcaterra. I don't
Yeah,
think
he didn't play.
yeah,
No, he was
played.
not active. So there were about, I don't know, I think there were 28 Eagles inactive. And Grant was on that list. I consider him more of an injury part of that list. He obviously wasn't sort of the deference players, as I call them. The
Yep.
guys like, well, run down the list: Jalen Hurts, Darius Slay, Devontae Smith, Hassan Reddick, AJ Brown, Marcus Epps, James Bradbury, um, Anthony Harris, Avante Maddox, Kaiser White, Brandon Graham, Isaac Sayamalo, TJ Edwards, Lane
Cam
Johnson joined
Jurgens
my
might
life.
play himself onto that list pretty soon.
Who is?
I said Cam Jurgens might play his way onto that.
Yeah. Well, I think Cam's a little bit different in the fact that they want to get him ready
Yeah,
as a rookie
have
player in
time a
case.
little bit.
But Jason Kelsey looks fine. He's going to be ready. So all these players, the deference players, and then there was a group of injured players. I consider Calcaterra in the injured group, even though he was able to get back in a limited fashion to the last joint practice. They clearly held him out as a precaution, not as a deference player, is what I'm trying to say. So they have a difficult decision to make at that third tight end slot. I don't think Noah Tungiai stood out in a good way or a bad way. He caught two passes, I think, for 9 yards, but he didn't do anything bad. It's just he didn't flash and do anything great either. So it's Dallas Goedert, who obviously is a deference player, and Jack Stoll, who, is a limited receiver, but the Eagles seem to like what he brings as a blocker. So there's some issues. And I said, if you want to talk about the depth of this team, I've said it pretty consistently. The biggest drop off is from Dallas Goedert to the tight end too, whomever you want to project that to be.
Right, not a lot of talent behind Dallas Goedert. John, last thing on the offense, our offensive line, mostly second stringers in there all day. You had Dillard, Jack Anderson. I think you had Sua Opeta was in there. Cam Jurgens started. Coyote Owosika. What was your takeaway on them? I saw a good tweet out there. I'm not sure who it was. Tweeted they're better than a lot of teams in this league. First though, I don't know
Yeah,
how
I
true
was
that
I
is.
was I was just yeah, I was just it was Andre Dillard from left to right. It was Andre Dillard, Jack Anderson, Cam Jurgens, Sua Opeta, and Jack Driscoll. Yeah, they could probably start on 4 or 5 teams in this league. Especially if Cam Jurgens plays like that. You know, it's a good group. It's tremendous depth. We just talked about Lane John. You never want to lose great players. There's a drop off. So you don't want to play Jack Driscoll instead of Lane Johnson. You don't want to play Andre Dillard instead of Jordan Mailata. But what I just talked about, you feel a lot more comfortable if you have Jack Driscoll, Andre Dillard than if you have to go Jack Stoll at tight end and replacing Dallas Goedert. So that drop off is just so steep at tight end. They have so many good offensive linemen. Sua Opeta is another example. Like, we don't even talk about Sua a lot.
Yeah,
Sua could be a starting offensive guard in this league in some other cities. It's an offensive line deficient league, and the Eagles are deep and strong on the offensive line, and hey, they have a talented roster overall. And I'm nitpicking, but that's what I'm known for, Zander. So I'm going to nitpick.
I'm good with the Johnny Mac.
I'm not in love. I'm not in love with the schemes of this coaching staff. I'm not in love with the scheme of the offense. There's no stinking motion. It's all RPO based. I'm not in love with the scheme of the defense, which is just like going into watching Game Pass, getting $99 if you're a fan and saying, "Oh, I like what Vic Fangio does," and you're a third generation knockoff of Vic Fangio. I'm not in love with it. I got to be honest. They're relying on talent, and they have a lot of talent, but I would like to see more innovation. And I don't see it on either sides of the football, to be honest.
Do you think
And they act like, by the way, this has all got to be kept a secret. Oh, you don't know what we're doing. Come on, dudes. You're as simple gets. And they act like it's something more than that, and it's not. So that's my nitpick for the day.
Is there an expectation from Howie Roseman or Jeffrey Lurie for them to kind of be more of that? I know we always talk about these young, innovative coaches that are and I'm not comparing our coaches to any of these guys. I'm just using the names because they're the ones who are talked about, and they kind of do what you just talked about our coaches not doing. A lot of motion, a lot of creative things, a lot of getting players in space. If our coaches aren't doing that, is that an indictment on the coaches? Is it just a Johnny Mac nitpick and it's not that deep?
Well, it's part of it. It doesn't.
I like the nitpick. I think it's a fair nitpick, and that they should have some of that should fall on their shoulders. You have a young quarterback, young receivers, young tight end, young running backs. You got a young everything.
Well, we were sold on more innovation, at least from an offensive perspective, when Nick Sirianni came in. That was sort of like the knock on Doug Peterson out the door, that he wasn't innovative enough, and it turns out that so there's two ways to think of it. It's like they're just taking advantage of the quarterback, which I like. I like that part of it, but there's also got to be a little bit of a middle ground. Like, I remember, Sean McVay, who everybody loves, right, calls his offense the illusion of complexity. In other words, it looks complex to those outside. It's not complex for us. Um, and I remember when the Eagles played Sean McVay, they said that, and Rodney McLeod said it all week. And all of a sudden, it's just about alignment, assignment. Don't be thrown off by all the eyewash and all that kind of stuff. And then they went out there and they were thrown off by it, right away, right off. They couldn't keep the discipline. So there's something to it. When you use that kind of motion, the Eagles were 32nd in the NFL using motion last year. 32 of 32 is what it is. And even Nick Sirianni admitted you never want to be bottom 5 in anything. So it's interesting in camp and practice, they're doing all this stuff where they're throwing the football. Then they show up in the game and it's all RPO, which is very difficult to stop when the quarterback makes the right decision. And Gardner Minshew was making the right decision. So you see how difficult it is to stop. But you're relying on talent. You're not relying on scheme. Now, maybe the Eagles have enough talent. I say all the time, Jimmy Johnson won 2 Super Bowls. He had 3 running plays. He admits it. He had 3 stinking running plays because they were like, well, I got Larry Allen and Eric Williams and Mark Stepnowski and Emmitt Smith. Here it comes. Stop it. And nobody could stop it. So there is something. Execution is more important than scheme. If you have good players and they execute, doesn't matter if the other team knows what's coming, but the other team knows what's coming with the Eagles offense and the Eagles defense. So that becomes like, that might not be that big of a deal against Detroit, say in week 1, but against Tampa Bay in the postseason, it's kind of a big deal. When you get the good teams, it's kind of a big deal. And that's where you need a little bit more help, I think, from the coaching staff. So that's my nitpick. People expect a nitpick there.
I think it's a fair nitpick. It's a good point, and I think fans should have concern with that. That only helps your young quarterback and your young players out, and probably somewhere in the middle is the gray area is where the truth lies. But switch it to the defensive side. How do you apply that to Jonathan Gannon? I know you like Gannon. You have a good relationship with Jonathan, but how do you apply that to him? I know that was a big thing last year. Not aggressive.
Yeah.
Personnel. Well, now he's got a reloaded defense. Do you still see some of that as an issue? His scheme needs to be,
well, I think you saw it with Josh Dobbs in the game, and look, again, we're talking about second team players. Like, I don't think Jordan Davis stood out today, and I think for him that I think because he didn't stand out, and Marlon Tui Pelotu and Marvin Wilson, who've had good camps, they didn't stand out either, at least when before Josh Rosen came in. And I think you saw, and it's not only Nakobe Dean. We talk about Nakobe more because fans are so excited about him, and he's undersized. But it was also Davion Taylor and Sean Bradley. I think you kind of saw them both exposed, all 3 of them exposed. If those defensive tackles aren't doing their job, those off-ball linebackers are in trouble. You kind of saw that in the first half. But I expect Jordan to play well, and that's what I'm talking about. You lean on your talent, and if Jordan plays well, Pletcher is back. If Javon Hargrave gets back and they play well, but I do think people are starting to realize, or should start to realize, TJ Edwards is a little more important than people realize to this defense, and that's why he's one of those deference players, because he's 242 pounds.
TJ Edwards, he looks like a world beater compared to those guys.
Yeah, he's 242 pounds, and if he doesn't get the help that you would like him to get, he can still hold up a little bit in the run game, whereas some of these other linebackers probably couldn't.
Yeah, so that defensive line is just really important for our defense this year, especially with the way Jonathan Gannon seems like he's going to call it. John, anything else? What did stand out to you today on the defensive side of the ball? I didn't love the defense. It looked good to me. I know it's stacking, but I know
I
it's the
love the
back end of the.
offense, and I didn't love the defense. And that's why it was score, 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 score. They were going back and forth. Again, second team guys, so you're not that concerned. Um, the two things I stuck pre coin toss, I think I mentioned this before. Josiah Scott coming out. That tells me, okay, he's made this team, Josiah Scott. Um, then I think you see the shift to Josh Jobe at corner, and I think he made a big play at the end of the first half when the Browns could have went on top with 4 seconds left. So he did a nice job there. I think he's kind of lapping the Kerry Vincents, the Mac McCains of the world, Tay Gowans. Um, although Tay Gowan plays special teams, he's a gunner, so maybe that helps him out a little bit. Um, but boy, the defense, there weren't a lot of splash plays. In the second half, they were fine. But again, is that more Josh Rosen, or is that, them uh, nailing things down a little bit? Probably a little bit of both, as they got a lot of the same players were in there. But same thing with the Browns defense versus Reed Sinnett. They gave up the big play to Devin Allen, as we mentioned, but it calmed down from what Gardner was 14 of 17, I think. And,
Yeah.
he almost had 3 touchdowns. And, too many teams. That's my issue with the defensive side of the ball. Too many teams are playing the exact same defense. And the Browns play it. Um, um, I mentioned that 49ers Minnesota game because they had joint practices and they rolled out 27 players, and you saw the exact same thing with the Browns and the Eagles. So for that reason, I was talking about, but they play the same defense. 49ers had Vic Fangio. Vikings now have Ed Donatel, who was a Vic Fangio lieutenant. They play the same defense. So, I was talking to somebody in the league, over 50% of the teams, he put it at, I don't think it's 70%, but I have to look down. Well over 50% of the teams are playing this style of defense. And here's my issue with that, Xander. If everybody's doing the same thing, then it becomes who does it best. It doesn't be, it's the old Howie Roseman say, sometimes you got to zig when everybody else is zagging. Well, the Eagles are zagging, man. They're going the same way as everybody else. And then it becomes, do you do it better than San Francisco or Chicago or Denver or everybody else? That to me, I don't like. I don't like that. And the same thing with RPOs in college and the college mentality coming to the pros. It's become a league where, okay, these teams run RPOs and these teams run play action, and you're in your little group, and it's who does it best? Who does it best? And Kyle Shanahan, for anyone who knows me, I have tremendous respect for Kyle as an offensive schemer. Like he does stuff different than everybody else, at least a little bit. I mean, he's heavy play action like his dad, but he's also got this unique running game.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of different things with Debo Samuel that nobody does. I was talking about that when Debo was unhappy. I'm like, Debo better realize if he goes somewhere else, they're not going to use him like Kyle uses him. And then he becomes a less unique player and maybe less important and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's one of those things I was watching today and it just stuck in my head. And I'm like, I'm not, this is not impressive to me. This is not what I was sold. And everybody knows, as you just said, I like Jonathan Gannon personally. I like Nick Sirianni personally. I'm not impressed with the scheme aspect of this
Is it
team.
possible it's subter? Is it possible it's you know they're hiding it, or is it possible they're
No, I guess. I guess. Well, I know they're not hiding it on defense. That's what they're playing. They're playing
Yeah, they said it last year. The reason we
Yeah.
weren't good at defense is because we didn't have enough talent. They threw their guys under the bus, kind of.
Are they hiring it on hiding it on offense? Maybe they're going to show up and be unique and do some different things, but I
I
don't
don't need
think
them to be
so.
the only one of one offense on the planet. I would just like a little bit of motion to help out the
That's
quarterback and the
all I'm
safety.
saying. That's all
Yeah.
I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. There's got to be a middle ground. Look, I want to take advantage of what Jalen Hurts does well, and that's with the RPO game. And you got an indication that Gardner Minshew can do it as well too, maybe a little bit differently. In Gardner's case, he's going to do it a little bit differently, but he can do it. Um, I don't have a problem with taking advantage of what you have, but there's got to be a little bit of mix when somebody's figuring it out and doing well. You got to have some other tricks that to help your quarterback. To me, the Eagles seem to be relying on their talent. And by the way, their talent is pretty good, and maybe that's good enough to win
Yeah.
10, 11 games. The problem comes when you do get up to that Tampa Bay who's better, or a team like that who's better. Well, you gotta figure out how to help your talent overcome that. Can the Eagles do that? I don't know. Maybe they are hiding stuff.
Time will tell how the Eagles coaches play the season. Everyone talks about the pressure on Jalen Hurts. There is a lot of pressure on those coaches. They might not feel it right now. They might not feel it just yet, but when those lights turn on, I got a feeling the pressure will intensify if the results are not coming. John, I want to talk about special teams. It's been a sore subject. It doesn't really look good. It hasn't looked good in a while. What's your take on the special teams, on Michael Clay? What's going on in that part of the football team?
Yeah, other than Jake Elliott, who you don't get to see because, in a preseason environment, you might as well go for it on fourth down, right? Because
Right.
especially when your kicker is as good as Jake Elliott is. But as other than Jake Elliott, the Eagles special teams were bad last year. I mean, Aaron was good early, but he fell apart late. Aaron Cepas. The punt return game wasn't good. The kickoff return game wasn't good. The kickoff coverage wasn't good. The punt coverage wasn't good. I don't see much difference right now. Look, they don't have a dynamic returner, and Jalen Reagor is their most dynamic returner, but can you trust him? I don't know.
They don't have much of anything on special teams
Aaron
besides Jake
Cepas,
Elliott.
yeah. They got to get back, and I've said this a bunch of times. They got to get back to when they had Chris Maragos and Brian Brayman, Najee Good, players like that. They would keep one or two players specifically for special teams, and they don't seem to do that any longer. And maybe they should. And that's where I thought Kyron Johnson was going to fit in. But he hasn't been. I remember, and we'll see. I don't know. I don't have the snap counts yet, but he only played 7 snaps on special teams against the Jets, as opposed to somebody like Patrick Johnson who had 18, I think. They don't have a Chris Maragos anymore, and until they find one, I think they're going to continue to struggle on special teams. And they don't have a Darren Sproles. They don't have a dynamic returner either. So now I think you're just hoping to be a net sort of you're not looking for a net positive. You're not looking for a net negative. You just want to be in the middle. You want to say, all right, don't screw it up on special teams.
Yeah, really. One more point, John, on defense. I want to ask you about Andre Chat. I'm not sure how to say his name. Andre
Sachere.
Sachere. He looked
Spelled
pretty good. I don't know
exactly.
if it was just a couple of plays where the highlight was on him. I don't know if he got the benefit there with the cameras, but did he have a good day? And then further, is there a move to be made at safety? Do we have enough at safety? Before training camp, nobody knew about Marcus Epps. Now everyone's talking about Marcus Epps like he's a stone cold lead pipe.
Well, yeah, he's a deference player.
Yeah. So Right. What's your thought at safety, and then on Andre Chachere?
Um, it's interesting because they kind of changed. They kind of flip flopped Josiah Scott and Andre Chachere in that when they started camp, Josiah was the backup to Avonte Maddox in the slot, and Andre was a backup safety. Um, and now Josiah is a backup safety, and Andre's backing up in the slot. So they've seen something that they like maybe in both, and maybe it's just cross training. He did come up the slot with a pretty good blitz. Um, he's a little bit bigger than Josiah Scott, so maybe they like that aspect of it. Um, but yes, as far as backup safety, I mean, they're not the one glaring weakness on this team from a starter perspective is, as you mentioned, people act like Marcus Epps is this stone cold proven commodity. He's never started before in the NFL. I mean, I think he's got a chance to be a good player, but we got to see it first. As far as the backups, I mean, whew, I don't think it's Dallas Goddard to Jack Stoll, but that's because the starting safeties aren't Dallas Goddard.
Right.
They're not.
Right.
So, you know, Josiah Scott, Kayvon Wallace seems to be making the late run. And he's young enough to where they'll probably default to him over Jaquaski Tart, who showed up a little bit on the third team.
For an
But
8-year NFL guy, though, John, I got to tell you, he does not look that good.
well, he's playing on the third team, and he's an 8-year NFL guy who some thought was brought in here to start. I mean, at what
Is there a
point?
confidence issue there right now?
Maybe he's got nothing left. I mean, I don't think it's a confidence issue. This guy's played not only a lot of football, he's played a lot of football on a really good defense.
Yeah.
So at some point, look, everybody runs out of gas in this league. So I think it's probably more of, maybe he just doesn't have that much left as opposed to a competence issue. But look, if he's going to make this team, he's got to show up pretty quickly. We got one preseason game left, a couple joint practices in Miami. Or maybe they're so confident in him. They know he's going to be a backup, but I just haven't seen any evidence of that to this point.
John,
I haven't seen any evidence of it.
Let's close it out, John, on some game balls. Might be hard to do. Might I don't know what's inside, what John's thinking on some game balls on who we like today, but the Eagles won 21-20. This is the post-game show edition of Football 24/7. Let's give out some game balls for today.
Well, that's a good one. There's a lot of options on the offensive side. You could give it to Gardner. You can give it to Kenny Gainwell.
I got one. I got to throw in.
I'm giving it to Boston Scott because he set the tone. 11 touches on the first drive. I think it was 14 plays. The numbers aren't great, but he converted a fourth down. He got the touchdown. So I got to give it to Boston Scott. Defensively, I mean, who are we giving it to defensively? Do I have to give one out? I just want to give one to Boston Scott. If I had to give one out defensively,
I'm not going to make you give one because if they didn't earn a Johnny Mack game ball, then I don't think it should be given.
Yeah, I don't think the defense earned a game ball, and they didn't play poorly in the second half, but at that point, I don't care. So
I would go as far as to say is Jonathan Gannon lost the game ball today with John McMullen.
Yeah, I wasn't in love with the scheme and the fact that they, once those deep tackles weren't having a game. Look, they were running the football at will, Cleveland, and it was not just N'Kobe, it was Davion, it was Sean Bradley. They were running the football at will. Yeah, I'm giving it to Boston Scott. He
Yeah,
deserves
that
it.
starting D line helps. My game ball is going to go to the Olympic track star Devin Allen. I got to give it to him. Don't
Yeah,
care
that's
that
not a
it's
bad one.
preseason.
Yeah,
He made a
that's not a bad
great
one. But
catch,
I
a
think
great route.
Boston.
He burned those guys. That's a highlight reel. Preseason or not, I don't care.
Yeah,
He'll have,
that's a highlight reel play.
yeah,
But
that was a
Boston,
great play, a
that's
great
a
throw, a great
sizzle. That's a
catch.
sizzle play. Boston was the steak, as they say.
There you go. There's steak, and then Devin Allen brought the sizzle. So I'll give the game ball to the Olympic. All right, John. Good stuff today. Good. Eagles moved to 1-1 on the preseason for what it's worth, whatever you make of it. But my biggest takeaway from the show today, from the postgame show, is your thoughts on the coaching staff. John is
Yeah,
thinking we
well,
need to do a little more
I
zagging.
I don't like doing what everybody else does. Like if I were Jeffrey Lurie and I was hiring a coach, and I'm not talking about Nick Sirianni, I'm talking Andy Reid, I'm talking Doug Peterson. I'm looking all the way back to Ray Rhodes and Chip Kelly. That's what they did with Chip Kelly, right? Now it didn't work out, but they were looking for something different.
Right.
It's what they did originally with Andy Reid. I don't know. I don't know. I don't like doing what everybody else does. And that's my guy. JG's my guy. Everybody
Yeah,
knows
he's your
that.
guy. I mean,
I don't want to. You know what? You know what set me off, Xander? I told you I was watching that 49ers um Minnesota game, and they had an interview with their new GM, Kwesi Adopa-Mensah.
yeah.
I'm glad I got that out. Um, and it was like regurgitating the exact same talking points the Eagles do with the defense. We love this defense. It's about limiting explosive plays, winning the turnover battle. This is how you have to play the modern game. It's like all these guys say the exact same stinking thing. And I'm like, what differentiates them? What makes them different if everybody's doing the same thing? So that's
The
kind of
thing
what
that I
set me
hate
off.
about it is the very thing that they're trying to stop, which is what you just said, big plays and the turnover differential really is what it is. The guy who won the most Super Bowls, Tom Brady, plays the opposite way. He
Yeah.
takes what you give him
Well,
on
that's
every
exactly. And
single
by the
play.
way,
And
because
he'll dink and dime you every single drive of every single game until he raises the raises the trophy at the end of the year.
and that's exactly what Gardner Minshew did to Cleveland, right? 14, 17, 12 plays. You can say, and he finally did make a mistake at the end on the third drive, but he went 14 plays touchdown, 17 plays touchdown, and then he won 12 plays and he almost they went for it on fourth down. Now, typically, if that were a regular season game, by the way, Xander, they kicked the field goal and they had 3 drives and 17 points. So if you have a quarterback who is confident in himself, you know what? I'm gonna make the right decision. And this is Gardner Minshew. This isn't Tom Brady. He's making the right decisions. Bang, bang, boop, 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 right down the field, 3 straight times.
We saw it last year. Derek Carr, I'll never forget it. The guy was 31 or 34 for 350.
Yeah.
I'm like, you would have thought this guy was the greatest quarterback to ever grace the league.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I'll never forget that from watching that. I remember being like, but all right, John, good recap. That's a big takeaway. I gotta say, I mean, you've liked Gannon even through the fire when people were shitting on him or tough on him last year. I think you were with him, and I'm starting to see a little bit of chinks in the armor there.
Yeah, well, I think he's a really smart guy. I think he's a really good communicator. But I was actually impressed because the thought process on Zimmer coming in would be he would be running what Mike Zimmer ran or running what Matt Eberflus ran, and he didn't run that. But it turns out he just runs what his buddy runs, Brandon Staley with the Chargers, who got it from Wade Phillips with the Rams, who got it excuse me, not Wade Phillips. He got it from Vic Fangio when he was with Vic Fangio, and Sean McVay specifically said, and here's where the crux of it all, Zander. Here's the crux of it all. Sean McVay, who is the guy in the NFL right now, said, man, that's a tough defense, Vic Fangio's defense. But the key there is Vic Fangio's defense. Vic Fangio. Go hire Vic Fangio. All right, don't give me the third generation Xerox copy of Vic Fangio.
It's like whisper down the lane. By the time it gets to the 10th person,
exactly. It's a game of telephone. By the time it gets down the road, you have a totally different thing. So Sean McVay said it. He brought in Brandon Staley. They won a Super Bowl. But guess what? Brandon Staley goes to the Chargers. They had a bottom 5 defense in the NFL. Again, the Xerox copy is never as sharp and clear as the original. I don't need copycats. I want somebody who's going to give me something. And look, maybe, again, I pointed it out with Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson was, and he admits it, 3 running plays, stop it. Nobody could stop it. So if you have the talent, it's not that big of a deal. I'd rather both if I had the best of both worlds.
There it is. Johnny Mac's post-game recap. Eagles-Browns. Eagles get the win. If you're not, this is the post-game edition of Football 24/7 coming September 11th when the Eagles take on the Browns. The JAKIB post-game show goes live with Seth Joyner, Mike Misnelli, Derek Gunn, Devin Caney. John will be reporting from live at each Eagles game for the show, so look forward to that. Make sure you tune in. I'll throw the graphic up so you guys can see that. And that'll come September 11th. And every week after the Eagles game, John's game balls were given out. The recap is done. John, have a good night, sir. We will see you in the morning on Birds 365.
All right. Thanks, Zander.